Hey all you freaks and geeks, welcome to the Lion Kingdom. I'm the Lion King, and this is my first official video, and I want to talk about Ed Kemper, the co-ed killer.
Well, I'm not an expert. I'm not an authority. I'm someone who has been a murderer for almost 20 years.
It's like a switch. You feel it.
Now don't worry, I'm not going to be going into details as this isn't a true crime video or anything like that, but I do need to briefly discuss them. Ed Kemper, a 6'7", 300-pound, highly intelligent and manipulative individual.
A nice guy.
Did you like Kemper?
I like Kemper.
Convicted in 1973 for the murder of 10 people, including his own mother and grandparents, where he brutally decapitated most of the victims. He's also been known to have committed post-mortem acts with the bodies. But what I find more interesting, at least in the context of today's video, is some of the volunteer work that he was able to do. Now, if you don't know, Ed Kemper was known as a model prisoner while he was incarcerated, which allowed him to participate in all sorts of activities, including volunteer work. Now, the one that I find the most interesting and the one that I want to focus on today is the work that he did with the Volunteers of Vacaville, or as you may have already guessed from the title, the Blind Project. Unfortunately, this wasn't some sort of secret government psyop to blind serial killers. As cool as that would have been, the Blind Project is actually a non-profit organization located within the California Medical Facility in Vacaville. Founded in 1960, just 4 years before Kemper would begin his murders, this is actually the oldest program of its kind, set out to improve the lives of the visually impaired, and have helped over 250 schools and institutions across the nation. With new or repaired Braille writers, which can cost from around $400 for used ones and $800 for new ones. The program itself would employ prisoners from the California facility in order to transcribe Braille and record audiobooks for the visually impaired. Kemper would join the program in 1977, just 4 years after he was arrested. From there, he was responsible for conducting audio readings from a booth, where he would be in charge of narrating and transcribing from best-selling novels to state law books, and even a few children's novels, which Kemper would claim were his favorites.
What have been your favorite readings?
Sometimes children's books, more complex children's.
Kemper reportedly spent as much time recording and working as possible, said to have spent thousands of hours a month working, even though prisoners could only make from about $30 to $36 a month, with some reports varying. With it being reported by Los Angeles Times in 1987, he had over 5,000 hours of recorded audio and hundreds of books transcribed, and that Kemper himself had used a combined 4 million feet of film tape. Now, the full catalog of books that he transcribed is unknown, but thanks to a spotlight in the media at the time, we do have a short list of known titles he's covered. Stuart Little by E.B. White, Charlotte's Web by E.B. White. Now, maybe I'm an idiot, but I didn't know that these two favorite childhood stories of mine were literally written by the same person. Like, maybe it's common knowledge and I'm just stupid, but I thought it was pretty cool. The Rosemary Murders by William Kinzel, Web Between the Worlds by Charles Sheffield, Windmills of the Gods by Sidney Sheldon, Dune, Book 4, God Emperor of Dune by Frank Herbert, If Tomorrow Comes by Sidney Sheldon, Petals on the Wind by V.C. Andrews, The Glass Key by Dashiell Hammett, Woman of Eden by Marilyn Harris, This Other Eden by Marilyn Harris, Sphinx by Robin Cook, Tangled Web by Giles A. Lutz, The Trumpet of a Swan by E.B. White, Ellis Island by Fred Mustard Stewart, Baudry's Law by Louis L'Amour, Merlin's Mirror by Andre Norton, Star Wars by George Lucas, one of the few books we could actually find audio for, Flowers in the Attic by V.C. Andrews, the other book that there's actually audio for. Now, while most of the tapes haven't been released or were lost to time, chances are they were just worn down over the years, sent out to schools and other institutions across the nation. None have been recovered, at least not publicly. I do think it's hilarious to imagine that, like, some super religious school, they're just sitting there like, dear God, voice of a monster the world can never know. Burn it. It's just like The Hungry Caterpillar with Kemper reading it. We do have a short section of Star Wars, thanks to the Center of Sacramento History for releasing this old footage with Kemper in April 29th of 2022 of an interview with KCRA-TV in 1983, where reporter Steve LaRosa interviews Ed about the work that he does as well as his state of mind.
Experience, and what have you gotten out of this whole program?
Well, I've learned that from the needs of the people that send us requests for reading, if I read what's put in front of me, if I read what's needed for those clients, I'm being exposed to materials that I wouldn't have chosen for myself, a much wider base of experience in print and in pictures that I think enriches my life. It gives it a lot more meaning.
What have been your favorite readings?
Sometimes children's books, the more complex children's books like White's Charlotte's Web, Stuart Little, Trumpet of the Swan, which are amazingly complex and before their time, all the way up through some high school, college text references and some professional references that have kept me on my toes, so to speak, and I think stretched my my comprehension levels.
Have you personally gotten any feedback from any
Yes,
clients?
I have. Some very satisfying comments from clients, and the more work someone like myself puts into that work for the student, or the professional person, or the entertainment reading person, the more that enriches their lives, the more it enables that person to do something with their potential, and that has been conveyed where we've done that successfully, and that's very, very satisfying.
And in my opinion, it's actually really good work with his outlook being manipulatively positive, considering the amount of appeals Kemper will go on to file. Which is why I think it's just so tragic that someone who has so much talent had to be a monster, but that's usually how it turns out to be. I do think it's really interesting that the tapes might still be out there somewhere, stowed away. Now, being the hard worker he was, Kemper was promoted to the project coordinator by 1985, regarded as, quote, a friendly and respectful boss who attempted to instill his drive into his colleagues. However, he sometimes became irritated by fellow inmates' inability to do sufficient work or their acts of theft in the facility. He can even be seen in these photos handing out several awards. And yeah, that's whatever. Kemper was a decent, if not demanding boss on his part. But the part that concerns me is what this prisoner who chooses to remain anonymous says next. And there was no free staff, no cops, nobody, maybe a few readers in isolated booths. And I had a good sound system, huge speakers, and copies of every cassette I could find. And Ed and I would crank our tunes, work, joke, whatever. We had break rooms with couches, and I would wrestle with his giant ass. He had me on the couch folded in half because as much as we joked about his weight and size, I don't think he realized it. I was gasping, Ed, you're gonna break me. Ed, you're gonna break me in half before he got off me, and he was kind of bummed that he could have really hurt me. Sir, the serial killer didn't know that he could have hurt you. Okay.
You wouldn't kill me. You love me too much.
The same person who just a few years earlier in the 1980s in a meeting with FBI agent Robert Ressler, the real-life inspiration for Mindhunter's detective Bill Finch, by the way, said, quote, the guard isn't coming back. Said, quote, the guard isn't coming back. They're on a change of shift. He's not going to be here for 30 minutes, and that time I could snap your head and leave it on the tape. I'd own the prison then if I killed an FBI agent. Also saying, quote, what could they do? Cut off my TV privileges? He scoffed and even said something like, trouble would pale before the prestige gained among the other prisoners by offing an FBI agent. This was a trained FBI agent who spent some time in the Army, and even he was absolutely shaken by this encounter, and that's why to this day when conducting interviews with killers, it's now mandatory to have at least 2 agents present. This just reminds me of when in a Wendigoon video he mentioned something about how everyone said Ed seemed so sorry and remorseful.
I understand the terrible things I've done and everyone's okay with him, when we know for a fact he's a super smart master manipulator, and everywhere you read on him they're like he's a different man now, and he's eligible for parole somehow, and in 2024 is going up for parole again, which no, don't let that guy out.
No, what the fuck are you talking about? The guy didn't know he could hurt you? He was probably bummed out you stopped him from killing you, sir. However, this apparently didn't give anyone cause for concern because just a few years later, Kemper was able to meet visually impaired activist Toni Ann Gardner and her at-the-time boyfriend, Ed Ames, known for co-authoring the book A Guide to Guide Dog Schools, and also Partners in Independence, a success story of dogs and the disabled. An interesting couple themselves if you want to know more about the study of trained guide dogs with the visually impaired. The couple would come out to see the prisoners of the program, including Kemper, in January of 1987, and time staff staff writer would write, quote, Tony Ann Gardner, 42, and Ed Ames, 56, a blind couple from New York journeyed by airplane and bus from their homes to this small town this week to visit with a dozen of their friends, murderers, robbers, rapists, and embezzlers. While Ms. Gardner, a rehabilitation counselor for the last 16 years at Kings Park Psychiatric Center at New York State Hospital, would have something a little kinder to say about the prisoners, saying, quote, these prisoners are doing so much for the unseeing population. We just wanted to come here to meet them and to thank them personally for their dedication to the program that means so much to the blind. The couple would spend over 10 hours visiting with 12 of the convicts who ran the program, but if you remember, the guy earlier said the prisoners pretty much ran the facility and there was not really any guards. I mean, I'm pretty sure they probably had some extra security while they were visiting, as well as them being allowed to have their guide dogs, Perrier, a black Labrador, and Ivy, a golden retriever. But no, that's still way too close to Ed Kemper for me. No. Anyway, Kemper would go on to say this to the couple: I can't begin to tell you what this has meant to me, to be able to do something constructive for someone else, to be appreciated by so many people, the good feeling it gives me after what I have done. The prisoners would talk for hours with the couple about being blind or under what prison was like, with Ames even being surprised with the prisoners sharing his support for the death penalty, with one of the prisoners going on to tell the couple, this is the type of program that is so important, so positive for people like us. All inmates should have something to do that is so meaningful. This has helped me keep my sanity. With the inmates going on to show the couple what the prisoners would do in an 8-hour day, which includes doing the recordings, transcribing books, handling requests, repairing braille writers for schools and rehabilitation centers, and doing any and all other work that is required for the program to operate. With the program's prison staff supervisor, Patty Wormer, even saying, but they don't stop with just their 8-hour day. This is their whole life. They break for dinner and are back in here working another 4 hours till they have to return to their cells for the night count and lockup. While the couple had written with Kemper and the other prisoners for some time, this was their first time in a face-to-face meeting. The blind couple said it was, quote, an opportunity for meeting the voices that have entertained and enlightened them through the medium of recorded books for so long. Now, while Kemper did bring up the volunteer work that he did in his appeals, even directly mentioning the Volunteers of Vacaville in his statements, the judge thankfully saw through this, because while I think that the work that these people are doing is amazing and important for the visually impaired, this is still the co-ed killer, one of the most manipulative serial killers in recent memory. Now, while I do believe it's important not to forget who these men are and what they did, as well as the fact that if they were out right now, they certainly wouldn't be transcribing books or trying to help anyone else, I feel like it's also important to take a moment to appreciate the good things that came from this prison, but it's also important not to forget the work and efforts of the organization on the outside, with them still being active to this day, where you can go to the website, which I'll leave a link to down below, and see the prisoners still working to this day. And while it appears Kemper is no longer part of the program due to a stroke suffered in 2012, or maybe issues with him not wanting to take a drug test, so much for that model prisoner thing, Kemper would also have some trouble in 2022 where he was involved in an incident with a female prison staff member. The incident was cited during his most recent parole hearing as evidence of his continued danger and lack of self-control. I personally believe he realized he's never getting out of jail and decided to say fuck being a model prisoner. Now, while this does end Kemper's involvement with the program, it doesn't have to end your involvement with the Volunteers of Vacaville. Like I said, I'll leave a link down below. You can go to the website and see exactly what you can do. I believe they host this community cleanup event every year, and the work they do allows the blind for a minimum cost of $3 a year and a maximum charge of $20 to borrow books from the Volunteers of Vacaville. With the prison having a catalog of 2,100 titles for $3, a blind person may send in a book to be taped, a master copy is then made, and it becomes part of the catalog where it can be checked out. And I just have to say, I love this program and everything it means to book lovers. With this not being the only program of its kind, but it is the oldest and largest in the country. And not to say that Kemper himself is cool or anything, but as someone who finds this kind of stuff genuinely interesting, to think the fact that it was so closely tied with him in the history of our nation is pretty neat. And that somewhere out there in these older schools or institutions, maybe locked away and never even suspected to be there, or maybe even played for schools of kids regularly without ever even knowing who voices their favorite stories, especially the children's stories.
Children's books, some more complex children.
Now, if you or someone you know believes you may have heard one of these tapes, please let me know. I'd really like to know more about them and if they're still out there somewhere. And I think that's pretty much it for my first video on the channel. So if you stuck around to me, it would mean the world if you could leave a like and subscribe. Thank you. See what happens when you stick around to the end? You get an extra thank you. Better not tell anybody about that extra thank you or I will find you.